I'm going to tell you a funny story that happened back before I met Ron. I worked in the stockroom of this one store that was something like a Kmart. And so I got acquainted with a lot of the truck drivers and stuff. And there was this one truck driver. He was kind of a strange-looking guy, but he was very good-natured. And he took a lot of teasing from the other truck drivers. And they always called him Turkey. That was his nickname. And he kind of looked like one, and so it kind of fit. And one day I asked one of the truck drivers why they teased him so much. And so he told me that one time Turkey had a delivery to make at the state hospital. Now, the state hospital was one that was for people who had mental issues. And so he made his delivery, and as he was about to leave, he noticed a line of guys, and they were getting a cup of coffee. And so he thought, cup of coffee would taste really good right about now. And so he thought, do I dare? And he decided he dared. So he got out of his truck and he walked over to the end of the line, and he stood there, and pretty soon he got his cup of coffee, and he went and sat down on one of the picnic tables and leisurely drank his coffee, and then he got up and started walking back to his truck. However, he didn't get very far before two men in white coats came on both sides and says, "Hey, buddy, where are you going?" And he said, "Well, I'm a truck driver, and I saw you were giving out coffee, so I decided to get a cup, and now I'm headed back for my truck." And they said, "You're coming with us. Now, which building do you belong in?" And he's going, "Hey, I don't belong in any building. I'm a truck driver, and see that truck over there? That's my truck." And he was beginning to get kind of worried, as you can imagine. He didn't want to stay at the state hospital. And so he talked and talked and talked, and he finally was able to convince them that to at least let him talk to someone of their superiors. And so they took him to the administrative office, and they talked to him there at the administrative office, and they were pretty well convinced that he was one of the inmates. And he was getting scareder and scareder, and the more he was afraid, the more crazy he acted. And so it was kind of a terrifying situation, all because he stole a cup of coffee. So finally, the administrator of the state hospital was called because they just couldn't figure out what to do. And Turkey said, "Please let me call my boss at the truck alliance. And I'm not crazy. I work here. I came to make a delivery. I saw there were a bunch of guys getting coffee. I wanted a cup of coffee. And so I stood in line, and I'm really sorry I did that. I'll never, ever, ever do it again. Well, they let him call his boss, and then they talked to the boss, but they wouldn't believe him. Even though the boss said, yeah, that's Turkey, and he does kind of look like he could be crazy, but he's not. And so they took and his boss had to come down to the state hospital and identify him, and then he could be on his merry way. Well, that didn't make the boss very happy, but he didn't want the poor guy to be stuck in the state hospital forever. So he went down and he said, "Yeah, that's my employee," and he went out to the truck with him, and he says, "Look, don't ever do that, or you've lost your job, because this took a lot of time out of my day, and it was embarrassing," and he kind of read him the riot act. Well, Turkey told him that there was no way he was ever going to stand in line at the state hospital again. He wasn't even sure he was ever going to get out of his truck at the state hospital because he didn't want to be kept. And so just about then he showed up at the store and to make a delivery to the stockroom, and the guys were telling him that they told me about it, and he laughed and he said, "Yeah, I was really, really scared, and I'll never steal another cup of coffee in my life." Anyway, I thought that might give you a big laugh.